Let's recognize the variation in a diverse world. What does it mean? What kind of variations we are going to talk about is the subject matter of this video. We have something known as high context culture and something known as low context culture. High context culture places high reliance and use of context, while low context culture puts low reliance and use of context. What is the meaning of this context now? So the context is non-verbal signals, meaning thereby that in certain cultures non-verbal signals will be given emphasis, and in certain other cultures non-verbal signatures will not be recognized or will not be given that kind of weightage or emphasis. If non-verbal signals are being given weightage, then this is high context culture. If non-verbal signals are not being given that kind of context or that kind of weightage, then it is low context culture. Few other aspects are also there related to this, like environmental setting. High emphasis, high context; low emphasis, low context. Circumstances, how you interpret. If you are interpreting, high context. If you are not interpreting, low context. Cues, other signals, other messages which you are in a position to get, which are not being communicated directly, then high context. Or if they are not being treated as significant, then this is low context. Friends, by and large, the eastern part of the world is high context and the western part of the world is low context. Let's see this film and understand more.
It has been said that when Americans want to say 100 things, they will verbalize 150 things, for they are explicit in their use of language in communication. When the Japanese verbalize 70 things, they are trying to get the other person to understand 100, for they are using implicit understandings and at times nonverbal cues to get their point across. Cultures can be separated into two groups with regard to communication. High context cultures such as East Asian, Latin American, Southern Mediterranean, and Arab countries were commonly homogeneous, sharing a history of common values and assumptions. When people of high context cultures communicate, it is not necessary for them to say everything explicitly. Nonverbal cues often communicate what is not said, and silence can have great meaning. In parallel to this are low context cultures such as America, Canada, and Western European countries. These communicators prefer clear descriptions, unambiguous communication, and are highly specific. Low context communicators do not rely or trust relationships in business communication. Instead, they rely more on the spoken or written word. So how can we bridge this communication gap? The gap is more about the language of behavior than language use itself. And it can be bridged by focusing on the key necessary to unlocking business in any form and at any level: relationships. High context cultures value relationship. Knowing the history and character of who they are communicating with influences what is communicated and how. A solid relationship supports a high context culture's natural implicit communication preference. Thus, it is an advantage to devote time and attention to relationship building when working with high context cultures. Being aware low context communicators may be perceived as moving too fast or as too direct and abrupt informs low context communicators to slow down, approach communication through developing understanding rather than just by giving specific explanations. Letting relationships percolate before trying to seal or even propose an outcome will create not only better communication, but better results as well.
Not only this context is important, but legality. How we are in a position to see the legal steps involved in any transaction matters a lot. In certain cultures, when you sign a contract, it means end of negotiation. Now whatever you have inked, whatever you have agreed is there on the piece of paper, and both the parties will follow this, will be abide by this. This is end point of negotiation by and large. But in certain cultures, this may be treated as a starting point, meaning thereby that you have signed a contract, now negotiation starts. Similarly, something related to ethicality. What is right may be treated as not so right in some other culture. So, we have to understand what's right, what's wrong, what's legal status of a particular document, how are we supposed to proceed. So, to understand all this, we have four guiding principles, four basic guiding principles. What are the four basic guiding principles? One is seek mutual ground, but before that, withhold judgment. Whenever you feel, oh, it's not done, we have already signed the contract, so how can you start negotiating again? Withhold the judgment. In their culture, signing a contract may be treated as a starting point. So, seek mutual ground. Tell your expectations, send honest messages. Tell that this is what I believe, this is what we understand. And if you have something different, respect different cultures. If they are treating the things in a different fashion, then understand, appreciate that, and then come to something known as mutual ground. In this manner, friends, you will be able to understand the legal aspects of doing transaction and ethicality of different cultures and will be able to proceed. What kind of social differences we may have? There are certain parameters on the basis of which we are in a position to understand the kind of differences we may have in social settings, social differences. The first is attitude about work and success. You put a lot of emphasis on work. How do you interpret success? I have a personal experience. I was visiting Paris once upon a time, and then the person who was at the reception of the hotel was going through a novel. He started asking questions, and then he asked, what do you teach? I said, management. And then he said, management? Meaning thereby that teaching and studying management is not being appreciated by that person, but emphasis on literature, study of literature, fine arts is rather more important. So, what is being emphasized? How people treat materialism, income levels, etc., are subject to cultural variations. What is importance of work and how do they interpret the success? Similarly, the concept of roles and status. Who will do what? I'm boss. How can I bring a glass of water for me? I have different roles to play. In certain cultures, such kind of straight-jacketed roles are important. But in some other cultures, such kind of straight-jacketed roles are not important at all. So, there is nothing like a status symbol, or there is nothing like which goes with a status. Similarly, the third is the use of manners. Few cultures may be informal and few cultures may be very formal. So, what kind of mannerism is required while communicating with others in a particular culture is really important. So, we have to understand the manners of a particular culture in which we are dealing. Then, concept of time. Concept of time is very simple. It means that punctuality, the value of time, how much value you give to time, put on time, you are punctual or not. In certain cultures, this punctuality is really important. They will give only that much time to you which they have already designated, allotted to you. Beyond that, meeting is over. But in certain other cultures, this time is okay. So, you may be slightly late or something like that. So, this is something like concept of time. Similarly, orientation towards a future. In Germany, People plan for 30 years, 40 years. And what do? We understand. So, what is our orientation towards future? How long we are in a position to see, how long we want to see and plan for. And the next one is openness and inclusiveness. Certain cultures are open, you share a lot of things about you, and you treat others also part of you, part of your family. In certain other cultures, that kind of openness or inclusiveness may not be existing, may not be appreciated. And finally, we have something like use of communication technology. It's not so that the people of different cultures may not be having those kind of equipment of gadgets which are being used universally, but how they are using such technology or equipments is really important. Mobile phone may be used for official purpose continuously. This is one part. I never talk about the official aspects on mobile. This is another aspect. So, how this communication technology is being used is really something which we need to understand. So, we have understood few aspects related to social differences, and we are in a position to understand that on such parameters we have to diagnose, understand a lot of cultures and then behave ourselves accordingly. Now, let's see what kind of that scenario may be. The first is non-verbal differences. Means this we have already understood, discussed in chapter 2. So, what kind of non-verbal cues will be interpreted in which culture? This also we have understood. Cultural context in this chapter number 3 we have discussed. So, the sender is sending a lot of non-verbal signals, is also trying to communicate with the help of context. So, you have to be receiver, and similarly you have to give weightage to the two aspects, non-verbal signals and cultural context. What may be the normal non-verbal difference? Normally, how do you greet? In different cultures we greet in a different fashion. Like we understand that in India, how do we greet? We say Namaste. In certain other cultures, the most popular way is to shake hands, or in some other cultures they may feel like hugging, a soft hug. So, this is the way they greet. Then the second part may be personal space. Personal space means what? That how much distance you are supposed to maintain while communicating with the other person. I have already shared this with you, that minimum is 18 inches. Minimum. I say safe is 24 inches. Stay away from the other person about 24 inches. Otherwise, it will be treated as intrusion in the private area, private space. Then the third is touching. So, in certain cultures, this touch is really important, and in certain other cultures, this touch is never being appreciated. So, non-verbal difference, understand how touch is being treated in a particular culture and then behave. Similarly, facial expressions. How do you say yes or no? Normally, nodding is being treated as yes, and shaking hands is being treated as no. What about this? It's difficult to understand how to interpret. So, understand how people behave and what does it mean. Eye contact. Normally, we say whenever you are communicating with other person, maintain eye contact. But does it mean that you will keep on staring? Check what's being appreciated in a particular environment or culture. Posture. How do you sit? How do you stand? Is also communicating, and what does it mean in a particular environment or culture is really important. And finally, the final thing is formality. In certain cultures, people expect you to be formal, and they also behave in a formal manner. In some other cultures, people may not expect you to be formal, and they will also not behave in a formal manner, then it will be like informal thing. So these are the non-verbal differences which can be appreciated about any culture. Then friends, the next part may be related to the difference based on age. Multiple generations work together. In some environment, senior persons, mature persons, grown-up persons may be treated in a different fashion, no? Like weak, not able to understand, comprehend, and the youngsters may be treated as real blood of the organization, enthusiastic, energy, etc., etc. But in some other culture, such senior persons may be given a lot of emphasis, respect, and recognition. So we have to understand what kind of age difference is being appreciated in a particular culture. Similarly, we have another aspect which is related to gender difference. What kind of gender difference it may be? Obviously, we are talking about the male and female. So, in some culture, female are being treated at par, but in some other cultures, females are being treated as a bit low, a shade low from their male counterparts. Similarly, on the basis of this gender difference, workplace roles are being allotted. Even we say, oh, female taxi driver. What does it mean? That driving is reserved for male, but it's not so. So, what kind of gender difference a particular culture appreciates and goes with, we have to understand. And similarly, how do you communicate with a particular kind of address, the kind of language? We know that whenever we are communicating, particularly in India, if the communication is happening with a female, then our choice of words, the sound, the structure of the sentence will be different. But when we are communicating with male counterpart, it will be different. So we have to understand how such aspects are being appreciated and playing their role. So another part is religious differences. Religious differences, we understand what is religion. It's also important to understand this aspect with a background of personal beliefs and workplace issues. I believe something, I may be having my fellow worker from the same religion, but I have a different belief system and the other person is having a different belief system. So how such belief systems and religion is being recognized, accepted, appreciated is to be understood. Only then you should start communicating in the cultural background. And workplace issues, how workplace handles a particular thing, a religious aspect or a belief system which is demanding something on workplace, how the environment appreciates that, it is something which you need to understand. Then friends, ability difference. We may have persons of different abilities. So how a particular culture handles persons of different abilities is also a matter of concern. I have seen that in Europe, in America, all the people, those who are having different abilities are being appreciated, recognized, and people keep on supporting them. In some other cultures, they may not be treated as part of the team, but in some other cultures, they are being treated as part of the team. What does it mean? That how sensitive you are towards such people, how much respect you are supposed to give or they are commanding, and what kind of assistance organization is in a position to provide to the persons of different abilities. Organizations are equipped to accommodate such kind of persons or not, and what kind of facilities organization is agreeing to provide.